Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the MPA webinar, Check 34. Tonight, we're going to be joined by Patrick Grice. Patrick's a pharmacist and was editor of Chemist and Druggist from 1995 to 2003. He then moved behind the scenes as project director for the pharmacy group at UBM, where he worked on the Chemist and Druggist data and the development of the C&D training portfolio that we all know so well. He was one of the team that led behind the launch of the C&D website. He then left UBM as publisher of Chemist and Druggist in January 2014 and is currently working as a pharmacy consultant. Among others, he has worked with PSNC in the development and the launch of Check 34. Check 34 is an online service that provides community pharmacists with businesses-friendly data on their NHS dispensing business. So, Patrick, I'm going to hand over to you and tell us what all about Check 34 and actually what does it mean to those pharmacists out there in the field who have it.
Okay, thank you, Finn. Good evening, everyone. As Finn said, my name is Patrick Grice, and I've been working on Check 34 now for nearly 2.5 years, and I'm pleased to say that it's making a reasonable impact in the marketplace. I'm guessing that most of you will have an account. If you have got an account and you've got the luxury of 2 screens to look at, you might want to open up your own Check 34 account on the second screen. Might be useful just to refer to it as we go through some slides on the webinar. And this webinar is going to look at how Check 34 can help you run your business more efficiently, and we're going to include some case studies towards the end to give you a feel for how other people are actually using the tool. So I guess the first thing to understand probably is that Check 34 is both a head office tool and a dispensary management tool. I appreciate that sometimes the boundary between the two can be a bit blurred, but perhaps think of it as strategic, head office, business planning, budgeting, setting targets, bonusing your managers if you've got a number of branches and that sort of thing. Whereas as tactical is more dispensary focus, like monitoring script flow, checking that payments have been made correctly, and looking for any potential errors. So on that basis, it may make sense to give more than one person access to your Check 34 account. The account is per pharmacy, and you can put as many users on Check 34 for your account as you wish. And it's not a free-for-all either. You can tailor access and restrict what your users see if you don't want them to be able to view all the KPIs that are available. So to start with, let's just talk briefly about roles and users. Creating a role and attaching a user to it is pretty straightforward. It's easy to add other people to the system, and as I said previously, you have absolute control over what they can see and do. So to create a role, go down the menu bar on the left-hand side, click on User Management, and you'll get 2 options, Users and Roles. If you click on Roles, you'll get the slide that's on the screen now. I'm using an account that's got a number of roles set up, but if you want to add another one, you simply click on the plus sign at the top on the Roles bar. Clicking on that plus sign will give you this screen. Here you can put in a description of your role, and by ticking the KPIs you can allocate which KPIs this particular role is able to see. Don't forget to click the Create or Save button at the bottom once you've created the role. Next step is to add a user. This time you click on the Users option in the menu bar. You'll get the screen coming up with users across the top. Clicking on the plus sign on the right hand side will bring this pop-up onto the screen, Add a new user. When you're adding new user details, be aware that you can only use an email address once in Check34. So think about how you might want to structure your account. If you're setting up a generic user for a pharmacy, you might want to use the pharmacy email address, for example. But if it's for a specific individual, then it probably makes more sense to use their own email address. It also helps if you use the email address as the person's username. It does help people remember their username if you use their email address. Once you've set up the user details, you can click down at the bottom on that pop-up panel to allocate the role. You'll get a menu of the various roles that have created, and you can allocate the user a role that you have already done. Once you've created the user and allocated them a role, then you need to decide which branches they have access to. And you do that by clicking onto the green eyeball icon next to the user name on the right-hand side of the screen there. Clicking on that green eyeball icon will bring up this particular screen. And there's a number of things that you can do here. Clicking on the pencil icon in the purple user info bar means you can edit the user's details. You can, going down the user info box, you can check that you've allocated them the correct role. Moving over to the right-hand side of the screen, tick which branch or branches, if you've got more than one, you want to give the user access to, and don't forget to click the green Grant Permissions box in the bottom right-hand corner to actually set them up with a pharmacy to look at. If you create a user and don't allocate them a branch, when you go to the KPI dashboard, there simply won't be anything there for them to see. Quick tip, you obviously haven't allocated a branch for them to look at. There's another quite useful function on this page, and that's the impersonate option, which appears at the bottom of the user information panel. There's two main uses for this. The first, I guess, is to double check that your user is seeing what you want him or her to see. So in other words, you can verify that you set the person up correctly. The second use is to actually talk through an issue with a user. If they've got a problem or you want to have a quick training session with them, it means you can click on impersonate. You can be both in different locations on the other end of the phone, but you can both see the same thing, and it makes it much easier to have a sensible conversation if you're both looking at the same page on screen. So quite a useful little tool there, that impersonate button for account managers. Who then might you want to make as a user? I mean, talking to people who do use Check34 on a regular basis, people have set their accountants up as users to download the monthly figures. It saves you having to pass them on. The accountant can do it themselves. Pharmacy technicians have been set up as users if you get them to reconcile expensive items, or perhaps if you want to record your FP34C, your end-of-month submission figures, on Check34. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. If you've got other directors in the company, you might want to let them have a look at what's going on. Or if you're a small company with a number of branches, you might want to let each branch manager have access to their own branch. So you can use Check34 to keep your team informed as well. It's not just a single user tool unless you choose to keep it as such. We talked about the accountant having access to Check34 and being able to pull off reports. So next I'm just going to quickly run through how you can do that if you're not familiar with it. Again, go to the menu bar on the left-hand side, click on Reporting Extracts, and you'll get the screen here with the various headings from your end-of-month FP34. I'm sure you're all familiar with these. Select which section you want to print off. Click on the arrow. Then decide which pharmacy or pharmacies you want to pull reports off for. Clicking on the green arrow at the bottom right-hand corner of the pop-up. You can then select the period or dispensing month that you want to look at. And then the sections or subsections within the FP34 that you want to look at again. There's quite a lot of information here, so you may not want to pull it all off. Just select the bits that are going to be the most useful to you. And finally, click on Extract, and that will deliver to you a CSV file that you can open in Excel and take away and do whatever you wish with. If you want to produce the same report every month on a consistent basis, you can do so, and you'll see on the left-hand side of the pop-up panel there's an opportunity to save your search or save the filter that you've just used. Clicking into that little box there will give you this screen. This means that you can actually save the filter, so you are producing the same search for the latest month or various other criteria. Put in the name of the search and click the Save button, and that gives you an instant reference the next time you come to use Reporting Extracts to pull that search off. You can simply click on the right-hand Extract button and the report will be created for you straight away. So once you've set up a report, you can extract it very, very quickly on a repetitive basis without actually having to go through the whole rigmarole of setting up the search. Quite useful if you want to pull off reports quickly every month. We talked a little bit earlier about the FP34C option on Check34, so I'm just going to quickly run through that and give you a quick idea of how that actually operates. This form is exactly the same as the fields on the form are exactly the same as the paper form that you fill in and return to the BSA. The only difference is that we've split out EPS and paper into two separate fields. So automatically, therefore, you're starting to differentiate a little bit around your prescription types. Select the branch if you've got more than one that you want to put information in for, and obviously select the month that you want to submit. It'll always default to the most recent month, but if you want to build up a bit of an archive, you might want to go back and put some previous month's figures in. Putting the figures in on a regular basis has two benefits. It will allow you to reconcile what you have declared with what has been paid by the BSA. So that will automatically highlight any differences in forms and items that have been received by the BSA compared to what you've actually put in the submission. You can also pull off your FP34C as a report if you wish to do so. And one other little benefit is that if you put your FP34C figures in on a regular basis, it actually creates a estimate of the advance that you're likely to be paid in the coming month, and that appears on the advance versus paid KPI, which you can access via the dashboard. So a few little tricks there, if you like, that you can use the FP34C recording tool for. And that again is accessed through the KPI dashboard on the menu bar on the left-hand side, beg your pardon. Okay, moving on slightly then, we're going to look now at some case studies, just to give you an idea about how some of the users that we have are actually using Check34 in practice. I've talked already about using the reporting tools and the expensive items KPI to reconcile expensive items. There's obviously still a bit of manual correlation to do, as this user noticed, but the information, I think you'll agree, is pretty easy to get at. And we've talked about using the FP34C input tool. This particular user, as I suggested, has used it to reconcile items submitted with those recognised by the BSA, and he's discovered that if he inputs his FP34C figures, he can get an estimate of next month's advance on the advance versus payments KPI. And it seems to help him out with his bank, which is always a good place to be, I guess. This particular case study concerns a small multiple that's changed its process for collecting end-of-month script figures. All the managers in the chain are now required to use the FP34C input option at the end of the month. And this means it can be pulled off centrally at head office as a report using the reporting extracts tool. The account manager has the joyful job of chasing up any late submissions. There's also a news function in Check34, which I'm not going to talk about this evening, but you might want to have a look at if you're an account manager with more than one branch to look at. This allows the account manager to contact all branches or individuals or groups of users with messages on a very straightforward and simple basis. The small multiple here has also set up their accounts team as users so they can pull off payment data that they need to complete the accounts. Moving on to another case study, this time involving working hours. This contractor bought a business some time ago and has managed to increase his script volume steadily over the past 6 months. He inherited some staff with the business, but looking at Check34 recently, he noticed that the staff hours declared had fallen below the staff hours required for the last 2 periods for which he'd been paid. I wonder how many times you've looked at the staff hours figure that you submit each month. I suspect it's not something that pharmacy contractors check that often. If your script volume is increasing, it's perhaps something that you should look at, for the simple reason that you could be losing out financially. This is the working hours KPI. This contractor, as you can see from the flat line, has been using the same figure for a number of months. Unfortunately, his script figures have gone up and down sufficiently, or haven't oscillated that much, so that the hours required has not exceeded the number that he's declared. Because if the hours required does go above the hours declared line, you're in danger of losing some allowances, as I'm sure you're aware. Just a little note here, if you're not quite clear what the KPI might be showing, or what you need to look at on it, there is some help for you here that you can look at straight away. At the top of the panel, there is a little eye. That contains information about the KPI. So clicking on that eye will produce you a pop-up with information about the indicator, what it shows, what you should be looking for on the KPI, and how do you know if there's a problem. And this particular working hours KPI points out that if the number of hours declared falls below the required threshold, this would dramatically reduce the amount of fees paid to your pharmacy for the month. So you may wish to check your fees and drug cost KPI and your average item value KPI for any month where there is a sharp decline in hours declared. Just an indication of how you can apply some of the knowledge that you've got and make the KPIs useful to you. Another case study, this time concerning a contractor who lost some EPS items. Most of the items he was dispensing came from a health centre pharmacy, and from the script source analysis KPI, he noticed that script items were being allocated to another incorrect prescriber. In this particular instance, it turned out the GP had moved practices, but EPS prescribing was still allocated to his old practice. So he was in the comfortable position of being able to inform the BSA and both GP practices of what was happening. One practice was a little happier than the other, I guess, but that's life. This is what the script source KPI actually looks like. And if there is a significant change in items from a surgery over a short period of time, 2 or 3 months, then this perhaps could be a cause for concern. It may be due to local factors, such as, say, a surgery relocation, but if there's no immediately obvious reason for the change, you might want to look into why it's taking place. Our next case study looks at a situation where EPS items were not being paid. This contractor had noticed that no EPS scripts had been paid for one pharmacy in her company, which had only recently started receiving EPS. On investigation, she found that the pharmacy had been failing to tick the relevant box on the FP34C. Small thing, but again, able to flag this up using Check34. And she probably referred to the EPS versus paper KPI. This is quite a complicated KPI. There's quite a lot of detail on here. The top line that you can see is in fact the total items trend line, so that's the total items that the pharmacy is dispensing. The next line down, in this particular instance, the blue line, is the number of paper items dispensed, which is declining slightly. The line below that is the EPS items trend line, which is as you would expect, increasing. And you could use these two to predict roughly when your EPS items is likely to overtake your paper items in total. But underneath the EPS line, there is a green line, and that's the EPS nominations. Each month, that's the number of nominations that your pharmacy has. This data was only available from March 2015, which is why there is no information showing earlier than that. If you roll over any of the datum points or the bars on the KPIs, you'll actually get the figures that relate to them. So scrolling over the datum here gives you the number of active nominations. You've actually got the detail. And obviously the number of EPS nominations for your pharmacy should rise slowly in line with the number of EPS items you receive. And it should eventually plateau when all patients locally have nominated a pharmacy. A decline in nominations or sudden changes from month to month should be, I think, a cause for concern. Moving on to look at another case study. This concerned a manager of a small chain of pharmacies in the northeast. He'd been using figures from the PSNC website for his budgeting. There's nothing wrong with the figures on the PSNC website, but they were a little out of date in that they referred to 2014-15, whereas looking at Check 34, you obviously get some slightly more up-to-date information. And he'd noticed, looking at the national trend for item numbers in Check 34, that last year the line was pretty flat. If you look at the KPI for item numbers, and if you click on the national trend line, which is the bottom one here, you can see that the trend line is fairly flat. I've rolled over the two datum points at the beginning and the end of the year, and in fact I think the number of items rose last year. It was about 3.3%, perhaps less than the 4% plus that we've been seeing for some time. And on the basis of this information, he revised his budgets accordingly. Of course, trends vary depending on how long you want to look at them, and you do have the option at the bottom of the screen of selecting 3, 6, 9-month or 12-month trends, which you can adjust as you wish. And the final case study I'm going to briefly look at came from a pharmacy manager who was having some concerns with why his pharmacy's payments were low in some months. He phoned the dispensing and supply team at PSNC to see if they could help, and they used Check 34 to help work out what his issues were. They didn't use just one KPI, they did a bit of detective work. They found that there was a high incidence of script switches, for example, and there was also a pronounced 56-day prescribing pattern from the practice that was the pharmacy's largest script source. And this caused some fairly dramatic swings in payment. So they used 3 different KPIs then to get to the bottom of his issue. They looked at script switches, the number of items paid, and advance versus paid. Script switches is the top screen on this slide. You can see that the pharmacy had a very good record on switches until November last year, when it rocketed up. 30 in November, 60 switches in December, and 63 in January, which was causing the pharmacy to lose over £500 a month in lost fees. And I'm not familiar with what the source of the problem was here, but there was obviously something going on that had internally that had caused that dramatic change. It might have been a locum or possibly a new member of staff. Obviously something particular to that particular pharmacy. This particular KPI shows that switches were running at an average of 8 a month last year. So any pharmacy that's showing over that is above the average, and this one certainly was well over. And it's usual to see fluctuations in the number of items dispensed due to the number of dispensing days in the month, but where the fluctuation is pronounced, you might want to investigate why, and the 56-day prescribing pattern was the reason in this particular case. This KPI shows the advance versus paid payments. The fact that the two lines are pretty much in sync here suggests that actually things aren't as bad as they might appear to be. You haven't got any huge discrepancies to look at. So it was probably something to do with average item value or the number of items being declared. So by putting together a number of KPIs and using your knowledge of the reimbursement system, you can actually do some quite detailed analysis on your prescription figures. Well, I hope that's given you a little bit of light on how you might be able to use Check34. It's a tool that you would be well advised to have a little bit of a play with. Do read the information panels to gain a better understanding of what the issues around it are. There is a troubleshooting guide that you can access through the menu bar. It's a flow chart, so if you follow that through, it may be able to help you identify some of your problems. If not, there's always the experts at the NPA or PSNC who you can refer to for advice if you've really got a problem. So thank you. I'm going to hand back to Finn now, and any questions.
Patrick, thank you very much indeed. We have a few questions coming in at the minute, and please, ladies and gentlemen, I know you've been all attentively listening, so any other questions over there, please do fire them over to us. Patrick, what date does the latest FPCC data go on to Check34 each month? So when does it get uploaded, and how quickly
it comes over? It's a bit of a variable feast, but we will get the data roughly a couple of days before the contractor's likely to get it in the post. Doesn't always work quite like that because it's the BSA that obviously provides it to us, and if there's an issue at their end over processing or there's some delays in getting it to us, then obviously we're in their hands. So it's roughly around the same time as the paper form arrives in the post. We are aware that we could get it a little bit earlier, and we're talking to the BSA to see if that can be managed.
That's great, thanks, Patrick. So another question is, why is there no comparative data of performance against nearby local competitive stores available? So I know we can see what the 10 nearest do as an average, but what about the individuals?
We put the comparator data for the 10 nearest branches in as a pooled average, and you're right, you can't see individual competitor data in Check34. However, coming shortly is CheckRx, which will be available to NPA members probably from mid-June onwards. And that does contain competitor data. you'll be able to see how many items your competitors are dispensing, how many MURs, how many NMS are being conducted. You'll be able to see what their EPS rate is, and you'll also be able to see which surgeries they're actually drawing their prescriptions from. So that sort of competitor data that you're probably looking for will be available to you in CheckRx.
Thanks, Patrick. I'm aware that there's some people on at the minute who've not used Check34 before. So if you've not used it before, you can sign up for it through the MPA website or go in and phone it up the office tomorrow. It's free for members. If you're not a member of the MPA, it's still accessible to all independents, and the charge, I think, is £10 per month for that one.
Yeah, it's £144 per annum.
Yeah, and that includes VAT. So.
No, I don't think that does VAT. Sorry.
Or does it not? Sorry. Oh, £12 a month then plus VAT. I do apologise.
£12 a month.
Tell us a little bit more about CheckRx, Patrick, since we've touched on it.
Yeah, CheckRx, as I said, will be available to NPA members from mid-July onwards. Watch out for notices in NPA and PSNC publications. If you want to see a little bit more about it, there is a piece in the PSNC newsletter that went out today, and there's also quite a lot about it in Community Pharmacy News that came out last week. But essentially, it's a tool that takes your PX report and turns that into useful information. The PX report is an item-by-item list of everything that a contractor has dispensed during the month. It shows which GP practice it came from. It shows which patient the script was written for, identified by their NHS number. It shows what the pharmacy was actually paid for it and the fees that attach to it. So it is a very detailed payment reconciliation document. The problem with it is that it's presented as a 72-column wide spreadsheet, and it's pretty difficult to get your head around if you don't understand it. So we've essentially taken that spreadsheet and manipulated it to make it more easily accessible to contractors. And you'll be able to search it in a number of ways. You'll be able to look up manufacturers' lines you've dispensed, who your top 20 patients are, which drug tariff category items fall into. You'll be able to search by GP practice. It's very flexible search tools. And as I mentioned earlier, there's also the competitor analysis data there as well, if you want to see what your nearest competitors are up to. It's quite a versatile tool. CheckRx gives you your FP34 trend data. CheckRx will give you the detailed month-by-month prescription analysis data.
That's lovely, Patrick. I'm just wondering if there's any other questions out there, or even better, if there's somebody's coming back with some user experiences that they find it. I know I personally use it within my pharmacy and checking what's going on every month. And I find it very useful for understanding what's going on locally, if we've got a big, busy month or a quiet month, for looking at my resubs and understanding what's going on there. In fact, most of what you've been talking about tonight, Patrick. Any other scary stories you've heard back from other people about what they've found?
I mean, there are some anecdotal stories which I haven't been able to track down, but certainly we've heard of people who've used it to try and determine where their EPS nominations are going to, where they feel there's been a bit of poaching going on. I haven't actually spoken to anyone who's holding their hand up for that use. I think most people treat it very much like they treat perhaps their bank account. It's not something they're diving into every day, but they'll be checking it a couple of times a month, and also using it for budgeting and for forecasting.
Yeah, no, budgeting and forecasting and understanding. I mean, it really is about checking good processes, knowing your MUR numbers and your NMS numbers and seeing what's there for the gaps in it is really beneficial as well. I'm trying to think of one. There was one story. No, I can't say that one. We're on air. We're with friends, but we can't say that at the minute. So I've been asked about Check 34 and the payments and whether that's likely to be charged or not. It is, as far as I'm aware, it is ongoingly free for MPA members, and there's no notice of that being changed in the near future. Patrick, do you know about any costs associated with CheckRx yet, or has that been resolved?
Well, for non-NPA members, the cost of CheckRx will be the same as it is for Check 34, £144 a year. If you take both CheckRx and Check 34 as a package, you will get a discount. I'm not aware at the moment of how the NPA are planning to charge for CheckRx or otherwise. So you'll have to watch out for NPA publicity on that score.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting this to go this far tonight, so we will get back to you as soon as we know. So how much is CheckRx for members and non-members? For non-members, it's $144 a year. For members, we're still waiting to find out, but it's as soon as we know, we'll let you know. So we've got another few questions in, Patrick. Just hold on a second. I thought, according to Data Protection Act, it is wrong to share our business of scripts. I know that this data, the BSA made this data available nationally about 12 months ago. Is that right, Patrick? And so it's just been out there.
There's two things I think here. The first thing is that your PX report is
individual.
So that's confidential, and we will not be sharing any PX data with other contractors. That's for your business only. It's business confidential, and remains as such. The competitor data that we are using is in fact in the public domain, has been for some time now, and you can download it from the HSCIC website if you wish to do so. The large multiples have been using it for quite a while. I know some people are quite sensitive about it being available in the public domain, but it is there, and I think if we don't use it, or independents don't use it, then they're missing a trick.
Oh, we've got a really political question about will any of the information published influence government plans on cuts and closures? That's not for tonight. That is definitely not for tonight, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry, I am not going there. I'm just conscious that we're sort of, this is going to be a short one tonight, and we've gone on a little bit longer than we intended. Before I go on to just wind up and tell you all about the next webinar, first of all, I want to say, Patrick, thank you very much. Very informative as usual. This will be available, ladies and gentlemen, from tomorrow onwards to rewatch. I know we've gone through an awful lot of information in this, but it's really just an overview of what's inside Check 34 and how best you can use it. So we'll send you an email out to let you know, and please pass it on to all your friends and colleagues, and even any of the staff that you want to introduce to this, to show them how it can be used. I'm also going to give you a heads up. Tomorrow, PricewaterhouseCoopers data collection period starts. So pharmacy teams in England are reminded that the advice on self-care or over-the-counter medicines data collection period starts on Wednesday, the 1st of June. The data collection activity will contribute to the PricewaterhouseCoopers independent assessment for PSNC on the social value of community pharmacy. It's a fairly simple data form, and it is literally just putting every time you have an interaction with a patient that is relevant to this, you collect it and complete it over the 7-day period. So the 7-day period runs from the Wednesday the 1st of June through to midnight on Tuesday the 7th of June. And what we're trying to do is record the number of times on self-care and the use of OTC medicines has been provided. We are terrible at recording how good we are. And this is really important to get out there, and this will inform the Minister, will inform negotiations and the future of our community pharmacy. So please get your survey done. There's a second short survey as well on additional activities that we do provide, i.e. all the free stuff that we've been doing. So let's capture that and get the second one in. Needs to be completed by Sunday the 5th of June. If you haven't had this information today, it is on the PSNC website, so please go there and check on it and see what we can do. Patrick, once again, thank you very much for tonight. It's been a pleasure having you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have enjoyed the webinar, I appreciate it was a bit short notice for this one for some of you, but our next one is very much about employment law, but it's not just on the legal side of it. It is, we've titled it Act Now and Shape Your Team for the Future. And so what we're going to do is take a proactive approach to the management of staff, to delegation, to try and improve outcomes and to improve workflow within the pharmacy team, for us all to work as one team, and how best to help people move through what's going to be a very challenging period over the next 10 to 18 months. Jane Hallis has presented for us before, and she's an excellent presenter, extremely knowledgeable young lady, and Alice Whittemore, the MPA's guiding light in terms of health, and not just health and safety, but employment law. So all I need to say is thank you very much for bearing with us tonight. I hope you found it very useful. I hope you've enjoyed it. It will be available tomorrow to watch again, so please pass it on to all your colleagues. Patrick, if you're still there, thank you.
Yeah, I'm
Do you want to say good night? Say good night to everyone, Patrick, and we'll leave them in peace.
Hey, everybody. Good night.
And just at the end, as we sign off, there'll be a little survey that will come up. Please fill in the survey. Tell us what you've liked and what you want to hear more of, and what you've not liked and what we'd like to get forward. Thank you very much indeed, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening.